The room went quiet the moment I set the blue folder on the table. Not the polite kind of quiet. Not the kind where people pause because they're listening. This was the kind where coffee cups stop halfway to lips. Where someone clears their throat and regrets it. The kind of silence that settles in heavy. Like everyone in the room can feel something expensive cracking, even if they don't yet know what it is. Kyle was still smiling when it happened. He was halfway through a sentence about quarterly growth, gesturing toward the screen behind him like a man who thought he had the room in his pocket. The slide changed. Numbers appeared. That was when his smile faltered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. The truth has weight all on its own. An hour earlier, I hadn't planned on saying a word. It started in the lumber aisle at Menards, of all places. Saturday afternoon, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the heaters humming like tired insects, carts squeaking over concrete. Somewhere nearby, a kid was arguing with his dad about the difference between deck screws and drywall screws, his voice echoing down the aisle. I was standing there comparing prices on treated 2x4s when my phone buzzed. Once. Then again. I glanced down, expecting a coupon or a text from my fishing buddy Ray, maybe a reminder about the river levels or a picture of a trout he'd caught just to rub it in. Instead, a photo loaded slowly, bar by bar, like it was taking its time just to be cruel. Bright green fairway, perfect blue sky, a grin I recognized too well. Kyle. My stepson. His arm was slung around a man I'd seen before, always in the background of Diane's stories, always a consultant, always conveniently around on weekends when business somehow blended into leisure. Diane had said she was busy with the girls. They were laughing, sunglasses on, leaning against an SUV that caught the sunlight just right. My SUV. The one I'd bought outright 6 months earlier because Kyle said he needed something reliable to look professional. The one I insured. The one I paid taxes on. The one I'd let him drive because he called me, Pops, and said thank you with just enough warmth to make it feel real. Another notification slid across my screen. My bank app. Pending charge. Green Valley Country Club. Greens fee. Cart rental. Lunch. All of it on my card. I stood there in Menards with a box of screws in my hand and felt something cold settle under my ribs. Not anger. Not yet. Something heavier. Embarrassment. Maybe. Grief. Too. The kind that comes when you realize you've been standing on a rug someone else has been quietly pulling. At 57, you don't expect to be surprised by people anymore. You think you've seen every flavor of disappointment there is. Turns out, I'd just gotten lazy about checking statements. I paid for the screws and walked out to the parking lot. The air had that early fall bite to it, the kind Wisconsin uses to remind you winter's always waiting its turn. I sat in my truck with the engine off, phone resting on the steering wheel, the photo still glowing like a bad joke. I didn't call Diane. I didn't call Kyle. I didn't even swear. I just stared. A memory surfaced without asking. Kyle at our kitchen table months earlier, spreading a manila envelope and a pitch deck like he was building a house out of numbers. Diane beaming beside him. Kyle talking fast, full of energy, full of certainty. I'd asked boring questions, margins, liability, guarantees. He laughed. Pops, you worry too much. And I'd signed anyway. Because back then, I wanted to believe in something that felt like family. I drove home past the Fox River, past the bait shop with the crooked sign, past the diner that still smelled like bacon grease at noon. Our house came into view, white siding, trimmed hedges, the illusion of order. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. I set my keys down and checked my phone again. More charges. Fuel. Pro shop. A spa deposit from Diane's book club weekend. It was all there, neat and organized, like a confession written in numbers. I poured myself a cup of coffee even though it was already late. The mug was warm in my hand. I took one sip, then set it down untouched. At my age, the fear isn't losing money. It's losing your footing. Starting over, sitting alone in a quiet house while the lake wind rattles the windows and everyone else has somewhere to be. I stood there thinking about winters, microwave dinners, The sound of my own breathing filling rooms that used to be louder. That's when I made the decision. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to confront anyone in a driveway or throw a phone across the room. Everything Kyle enjoyed ran through paperwork I understood better than he ever had. Contracts. Guarantees. Authorizations. Quiet things. Old-fashioned things. I grabbed my jacket and drove to Culver's, ordered a butterburger I couldn't taste, and watched families file in with kids sticky from ice cream. I thought about how many times I'd paid for things just to keep the peace. Turns out, peace was the most expensive thing I'd ever bought. When I got home, I went straight to the garage. The heater clicked on. Tools lined the wall the way they always had, orderly, dependable. I pulled a binder from the shelf. Mercer Root. The cover was worn from being opened and closed by someone who believed in details. I set it on the workbench and opened it. I didn't smile. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. The garage smelled like old oil and sawdust. The space heater hummed, pushing dry warmth across the concrete. I shut the door, pulled the chain on the overhead light, and stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet. No music, no radio. Just me and the truth. I flipped to the first tab. Ownership and voting rights. Kyle had skimmed this section when we signed, more interested in the coffee Diane brought in than the lines I'd highlighted. He'd called it boilerplate. I called it gravity. 73%. Not flashy, not public, but real. I'd structured it that way because I'd spent 30 years in logistics watching companies rise on enthusiasm and collapse on details. I didn't want control. I wanted protection. I turned the page. Capital tranches, disbursement schedules. Then the clause most people ignored because it sounded boring. Material misuse and reputational harm. The kind of language lawyers use when they don't want surprises. I ran my finger under the sentence and felt my pulse steady. My phone buzzed. Diane. I let it ring, then answered. Hey, she said softly, you okay? You've been distant today. I'm fine, I said. It wasn't a lie, not yet. She filled the silence the way she always did when she wanted information. Kyle said you might be tired. You work too much. I looked at the page labeled Personal Guarantee. My name sat there in clean, confident print, promising a bank I'd stand behind a fleet lease if things went sideways. I remembered Kyle's grin when the approval came through. Couldn't have done it without you, Pops. Yeah, I said, I know. After we hung up, I poured the coffee down the sink and rinsed the mug clean. I didn't want anything lingering. Then I found the email. Forwarded months earlier by mistake. Kyle joking with his team about vision and scaling. Words that sounded impressive until you asked what they meant. And then the line that tightened my jaw. Stepdad's money, my vision. He won't notice the details. I read it twice. The heater clicked. The clock ticked through the wall. I didn't feel angry. I felt reduced. Like a wallet with a pulse. I called Walt Jensen. He answered on the second ring, like always. What's up, Tom? I need you to sanity check something, I said. No drama, just numbers. He listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he exhaled. You're not wrong, he said, and you're not cruel. You're late. He walked me through the sequence, what to touch, what not to, how to move clean. Swing legal, he said, quiet, you don't want collateral damage. That phrase stuck. Kyle had employees, families, people who didn't play golf on my dime. I wasn't trying to hurt them. My phone lit up again. Kyle, Dad, quick question. Did you change anything with the card? The pro shop says it declined. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then typed, could be the bank. I'll look into it Monday. He sent a thumbs up emoji like that settled it. I closed the binder and opened another folder. Insurance. Vehicle authorization. The SUV was still in my name. Kyle was listed as a driver, not an owner. That wasn't a fight. That was a phone call. I made it, calm, professional. Authorization removed. By the time I hung up, My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the understanding that this would cost me too. Fees, delays, consequences. Freedom always does. I sat there thinking about winter again, about whether being right would keep me warm. Diane called once more. I let it go to voicemail. Her message started soft and ended tight. This isn't fair. Fair. The word echoed in the garage. I put the binder back on the shelf and turned off the light. As I walked inside, my phone buzzed again. A bank notification. A reversal posted. Another charge dropped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the first domino tipping over. "I'll get it," he said. He always said that, always believed he would. Around noon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the dealership's number. The one I'd visited twice that year for routine maintenance and once for a warranty extension I'd insisted on keeping in my own name. "Mr. Halverson," the woman said, voice crisp and practiced. "The vehicle authorization update has been processed, effective immediately. The driver is no longer covered. If the vehicle is operated, insurance will not apply." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded older than I felt, or maybe it sounded exactly my age. 10 minutes later, the text came through. "Are you serious? The SUV says I'm not authorized." I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I locked the phone and set it face down on the counter. No response is still a response. Diane started pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal, phone glued to her ear, voice bouncing between whisper and hiss. I could hear Gavin's name more than once. When she finally hung up, she turned on me with a look I hadn't seen in years, sharp, defensive, afraid. "Gavin says you're being vindictive." I studied her, really studied her. The same woman who used to squeeze my arm at church picnics. The one who called me her rock. The one who swore we were a team. "Gavin doesn't pay our bills," I said quietly. She laughed, short and brittle. "He would if you weren't doing this." And that was it. The moment everything snapped into focus. This wasn't about Kyle. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about me. It was about the lifestyle, the image, the illusion of success that looked good from the outside but was hollow underneath. And none of it, not one part, had her name on it. My phone buzzed again, bank alert, balances shifting, accounts settling, lines closing. I felt my chest tighten, not with satisfaction, but with something closer to dread. There were employees involved, real people, people who had nothing to do with this mess. I called Walt. "Is there a way to protect payroll?" I asked. There was a pause. Then, "There is, but you'll take the hit." "I can live with that," I said. By late afternoon, Kyle's texts started coming in faster, shorter, sharper. "Please. We need to talk. You're blowing this up." I finally sat down at the kitchen table and listened to Diane's voicemails. The first was tearful. The second, furious. The third, quiet. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said. "You're punishing me." I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. "I'm not punishing anyone," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm stopping." At 5 o'clock, another message came through. "Dad, my card just declined at the pro shop. In front of a client. This is humiliating." I typed one sentence. Humiliation fades. Debt doesn't. No reply. That evening, I drove down to the river and sat in my truck, watching the water slide past like it had no opinion about any of this. Leaves floated by, slow and unbothered. I thought about the first time Kyle called me, Pops. About Diane's laugh before it started sounding forced. About the employees who trusted a system built on borrowed confidence. This wasn't clean. It wasn't easy. But it was necessary. When I got home, Diane had packed a bag. She stood by the door like she was waiting for me to stop her. "You could end this," she said. I nodded. "So could you." She left without another word. The house felt hollow afterward, bigger, louder in its quiet. That night, an email came in from Kyle. Mass sent, polished. Investor update night, growth story. At the bottom, a personal note. "Come see what you helped build." I smiled for the first time all day. The next few days blurred together. Kyle's calls turned rehearsed. Like he'd practiced them in the mirror. We can restructure. It's just a liquidity issue. This doesn't have to be ugly. Diane's tone softened too. I just wanted to feel seen, she said one night. I hear you, I replied, but this isn't about feelings anymore. At the Rotary Club lunch, I felt the shift before anyone said a word. Conversations paused when I walked in. Kyle laughed too loudly near the front of the room. People noticed. Small towns don't gossip. They circulate. That night, Diane came back one last time, eyes red, voice shaking. You're being cruel, she said. Cruel would be pretending nothing happened, I answered, and letting it happen again. She left quietly. Sunday night, I laid out a clean shirt and pulled the blue folder from the shelf. I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. The hotel ballroom smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. Kyle stood at the front, tie tight, smile fixed. Tom, he said when he saw me, glad you could make it. I took a seat. The presentation started. Buzzwords, projections, confidence built on sand. Then the finance slide. Questions came. I stood. My name is Tom Halverson, I said, majority investor, 73%. The room shifted. I've withdrawn my financial backing, legally, documented. Papers hit the table. This vehicle is mine, authorization removed. Silence. Kyle's face drained. You can't do this. I already did. An older investor leaned forward. That explains the exposure. This isn't revenge, I said. It's boundaries. No one clapped. They didn't need to. I walked out into the night air and breathed for the first time in months. The divorce was clean. The company survived, smaller, humbler. I moved into a quiet place with a garage and a workbench. Some nights were lonely. But peace has a sound. And once you hear it, you don't forget. This wasn't revenge. It was the moment I stopped paying for silence. And started choosing myself.